Shabbat Shalom, everyone. This week we are in the Torah portion Pinchas, which can be found in Numbers 25:10 through 31. Our half-Torah portion can be found at Jeremiah 1 through chapter 2, verse 3. And the Chadashah portion is Luke 13:1 through 10. Now, in doing my research for the sermon, I found that Phinehas was, well, a pretty cool guy. Yeah, I know it's a very deep assessment, but he really was, and not just because he, well, skewered a couple of people. Given what I read, I think there's a chance that he lived an unnaturally long life blessed by the Lord. You'll see what I mean as we go. At the beginning of our Torah portion, we read, "And the Lord said to Moses, Phinehas, or Pinchas, the son of Eleazar, son of Aaron the priest, has turned back my wrath from the people of Israel, in that he was jealous with my jealousy among them, so that I did not consume the people of Israel in my jealousy. Therefore say, Behold, I have given him my covenant of peace, and it shall be to him and to his descendants after him the covenant of perpetual priesthood, because he was jealous for his God and made atonement for the people of Israel." In order to understand this portion, we need to back up just a few verses and remind ourselves just what Phinehas did to get Adonai's attention. At the beginning of Numbers 25, we read that cult prostitutes from Moab were leading the children of Israel astray. Those of you who read last week's portion are familiar with Balaam and his failed attempts to curse the children of Israel. No matter how many times he tried to speak curses against Israel, Adonai constantly caused his words to come out as blessings instead. This is because as long as we stay in the Lord's hand, as long as we take refuge in him, no spiritual power may curse us. Amen. So Balaam tried a different approach, luring the children of Israel away from their God's hand, because he knew that if he could trick us into forsaking Adonai, we would be vulnerable to spiritual attacks and curses. We would, in essence, curse ourselves. And what better way to lead them astray than the temptations offered by beautiful women? Certainly in today's world, the temptation of, well, the female form has led many men astray from Adonai. Men believe they can't help it. They see the female form and go mad with desire. Thus, the enemy repeatedly tempts us, even to this day, with inappropriate media and hookup culture. Even when we manage to turn away from such things, the enemy will still tempt us with thoughts and images in our very minds. Thus, we must take every thought captive and maintain control over our emotions as best we can. At the beginning of Numbers 25, we read, "Now Israel remained in Acacia Grove, and the people began to commit harlotry with the women of Moab. They invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. So Israel was joined to Baal of Peor, and the anger of the Lord was aroused against Israel." From this, there are a few important things to take away. First, that the men of Israel were committing adultery with the women of Moab and patronizing their prostitution. Second, the men of Israel sacrificed to Moab's gods. This factor is what helps us understand that these were not merely prostitutes who had relations with men for profit. These were prostitutes who were part of the religious practices dedicated to their pagan gods. And yet, is that not also what a prostitute who does what she does merely for profit is? For our Messiah says at Matthew 6:24, "You cannot serve both God and money." From this, we understand that even money can be as an idol if we serve it instead of serving Adonai. Multiple times I have had people come up to me and say that their life goal was to get rich. And my response to that is, aim a little higher. For money, like the pagan gods, is temporary, and a pursuit of it will lead to ruin. The same sort of ruin that the cult prostitutes of Moab would face. Now, the third thing we need to understand about this passage is that Israel was joining itself to Baal of Peor. Now, the Hebrew word for joined there is samad, which can also mean to fasten or to frame. It comes from the same root word as tzamed, which refers to the yoking together of two oxen, or otherwise two beasts of burden, so that they may work together. They had taken on the yoke of being bound to Baal of Peor. According to Rabbi Bahia's commentary, this was to indicate not just that they had turned to serve a false god rather than Adonai, but also to note that they had done so by yoking themselves together with these cult prostitutes. And if you want to know how vile this Baal of Peor was, look up Rashi's and Siftei Chakanim's commentaries on the subject. I feel this is too polite of an environment to share the rather disgusting rituals of Baal of Peor's worship service. I will only allude to the fact that Baal of Peor was Lord of the Gap, and it is a very specific gap that this refers to, a gap that every human being has. Okay, today there are still those who worship this Lord of the Gap, though they do not know him by that name. This people dedicated to Baal of Peor will often try to entice or even force other people into acceptance of their false deity, and have infiltrated synagogues and churches to corrupt them from the inside, just as the Moabites did back in the days of our Torah portion. Again, for the sake of remaining polite, I will not elaborate any further. Let those who have understanding hear this and know, and may those who do not understand come to ask me later, preferably after Oneg. The important part for us to understand is that this is the very definition of a crisis. In mass numbers, the children of Israel have committed 3 crimes for which the Torah prescribes the death penalty: adultery, idolatry, and worshiping other gods. The Torah portion then goes on to describe men of Israel weeping before the tent of meeting. If we look at this carefully, it paints a picture of what was happening. While so many of the children of Israel were engaged with the Moabites in this idolatrous rebellion against Adonai, we have certain people, including Moses, who are so distraught over it that all they can do is weep in front of the tent of meeting. Moses has seen enough crushed rebellions at this point to know that this will not end well for the Israelites, and those weeping with him have come to the same understanding. These are men who are deeply offended and hurt by what is going on. At Numbers 25:6, we then read, "And indeed one of the children of Israel came and presented to his brethren a Midianite woman in the sight of Moses and in the sight of all the congregation of the children of Israel who were weeping at the door of the tabernacle of meeting." So while Moses and those with him are weeping over the Israelites' sins, a certain man walks right by them with one of the cult prostitutes. On its face, this is, at the very least, wildly insensitive. One group of people is weeping over sin, and 2 others come by them flaunting their sin. And this is something we see every day, even today. The moment a sinful person learns that you understand a behavior they enjoy to be sinful, they will often flaunt that behavior in front of you as a mockery. This is especially true if they know you used to indulge in that sin yourself. It's common for people living sinful lifestyles to flaunt those lifestyles in front of those who find such a way of living offensive. Sometimes this is just to make fun of those people, and sometimes it is because they are trying to tempt those people to take part in it as well with them. In the case of this Torah portion, if those worshiping Baal of Peor could seduce Moses and the elders into doing the same as they had done, it would have solidified their victory and doomed the children of Israel. We later learn that this guy who goes to the tent of meeting with a cult prostitute is Zimri, the son of Salu, chief of a father's house belonging to the Simeonites. So a prince of the people parades his new mistress in front of them, and he takes her into a tent just outside the tent of meeting, a holy place of Adonai, to commit sexual sin with her. We need to understand that in those days, what God you served indicated what nation or tribe you were loyal to. If you worshipped the gods of Egypt, you were considered an Egyptian. If you worshipped the gods of Babylon, you were a Babylonian. It's further important to understand that in a great many pagan religious practices, fornication is a ritual, not just something they do for fun. It's a declaration of allegiance to a pagan god. This was not just a case of a man flaunting his sinful behaviors in front of those in mourning. It was a coup. Adonai was and is and shall always be the Israelite people's king. While surely Zimri knew that Adonai could not be slain, he was nonetheless attempting a coup against Adonai on behalf of Baal of Peor. And this prince of Israel was declaring war on the God of Israel, trying to claim the holy ground of the tabernacle for Baal. We see something similar in Antiochus, the Greek king who went in the temple of Adonai and sacrificed pigs to Zeus upon the altar. Zimri knew that he and Cosby were defiling the tent of meeting, making it into a place where Adonai would not wish to dwell. I can't help but wonder if the temple on Epstein's Island isn't a temple to Baal Peor, given the debauched things that happened on that monster's private island. I have no solid evidence of this, but evil has a certain way that it likes to operate, and it wouldn't surprise me. If Zimri succeeded in what he was attempting here, Adonai's presence would have left the defiled tent of meeting, and Baal of Peor would have set up shop in his place. In the same way, today we need to understand that if we thoroughly and repeatedly defile ourselves, our homes, and or our synagogues, then we risk leaving Adonai's presence. And when we leave him, we become prey to predatory spirits. Now that we have a better grasp of the gravity of the situation, let's take a look at the man called Phinehas. From Numbers 25:7, we learn that he is the son of Eleazar, who was the son of Aaron the priest. Thus, Phinehas is likely a priest, but at the very least, he's part of the tribe of Levi. Upkeeping and guarding the tent of meeting is part of his duty. And his name Phinehas, according to Strong's Expanded Exhaustive Concordance, means mouth of the serpent. Basically, it's pa-nachash, with the letter pe being a mouth in pictographic Hebrew and nakash being the Hebrew word for serpent, the same one used during the Garden of Eden story. Now, when we think of serpents in the Bible, we tend to think of them as a sign of evil. The first one that comes to mind, like I said, is the Nakash, the serpent in the Garden of Eden, or perhaps Revelation 12:9, where the devil is called an ancient serpent. However, at Matthew 10:16, Yeshua tells his Talmudim, his disciples, "Behold, I am sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. So be wise as serpents and innocent as doves." So we see the serpent, in that case, can also be a symbol for wisdom. We also get the story of Moses raising up the bronze serpent in the wilderness, where the serpent becomes a symbol of healing. Moreover, at John 3:14-15, we read, "And as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that whoever believes in him may have eternal life." Here we see the serpent as a symbol for the Messiah himself. So Phinehas, this Levite, the mouth of the serpent, witnessed a prince of Israel committing a terrible crime before the people and a temptation for them, and before the tent of meeting, making it deepest blasphemy. Many of you already know what happened next. At Numbers 25:7-8, we read that Phinehas rose from among the congregation and took a javelin in his hand, and he went after the man of Israel into the tent and thrust both of them through, the man of Israel and the woman through their body. At the beginning of our Torah portion, Adonai rewards Phinehas for this zealous action. Adonai says, "Behold, I give him my covenant of peace, and it shall be to him and his descendants after him a covenant of perpetual priesthood, because he was zealous for his God and made atonement for the people of Israel." Let us make sure that we do not misunderstand what happened here, lest we take the wrong lesson from this story. This story is not meant to encourage us to rise up and go kill some people who worship other gods, or to kill people who commit sexual sins. If you see a church flying a pride flag out front, pray for them, certainly, and stay away, but it is not on you to go and skewer the pastor, no matter how misguided he may be. All right? It is not for you to throw stones at people in pride parades. It is not for you to physically attack church or synagogue leaders whom you think are doing or teaching the wrong things. For that matter, it is not our place to go to the nearest mosque and shout at Muslims. It is not our place to go to a bar and scream at the people drinking there about their sins and the debauchery they're engaged in. Do not for 1 second take Phinehas' story to be an invitation for us all to act like a bunch of holy vigilantes. For one thing, we have enough of our own sins to worry about without attacking everyone else. I know I certainly do. Modern Western civilization is steeped in sin, swimming in it, sometimes drowning in it, which makes it far harder for us to resist temptation. Thus, we have a need to constantly repent. If we want Adonai and our fellow human beings to be merciful with us as we struggle to turn away from sinful ways, we need to in turn be merciful to others. As Yeshua says at Matthew 7:3-5, "Why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye but do not notice the beam in your own eye? Or how will you say to your brother, 'Let me take the speck out of your eye,' and look, the beam is in your own eye? Hypocrite, first take the beam out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. We need to understand the circumstances surrounding and leading up to Phinehas' actions. First of all, the children of Israel gathered in the camp had seen Adonai's miracles firsthand. There was no room for doubt no room for them to doubt either the Lord's existence or his power. They knew for a fact that Adonai was there and that he was the Lord, and they still chose to serve another spirit, knowing this. Second, and I can't stress this enough, the Baal worshippers trying to engage in pagan rituals, they did this in front of the holy place. This was an attempted coup. They could have left the camp and gone off with the Moabites if that was the life they wanted to live. They could have gone off somewhere else if that was the way they wanted to do things. They could have gone back to Moab with them and started new lives there. Instead, they insisted on corrupting their fellow Israelites. And here's a big key there. Frequently in Torah, we're told to remove the evil from the camp. And that really means exactly what it means. The evil needs to be taken from the camp and moved elsewhere. If they keep coming back, then death penalty comes into play. It is one thing, though, to leave the Lord's presence to engage with foreign wicked spirits. It is another thing entirely to attempt to bring those wicked spirits into the territory that belongs to the Lord, to attempt to drive Adonai out of his own home. And finally, we need to understand that taking care of the tabernacle was Phinehas' job because he was a Levite. It was his solemn duty. With all of that in mind, it seems near impossible that any of us will be in anything close to a similar situation to the one Phinehas was in when he took up the spear. The closest modern analogy I can think of is this. From time to time in this congregation, we've had problems with people who've come here declaring themselves prophets. They have subsequently started accusing leadership of deceiving everyone and then encouraged us to follow the practices of other religions, basically the customs of other gods. They've sometimes claimed to practice magic and even tried to cast spells in front of us. On those occasions, security has stepped up to remove such people from the synagogue. They have had to use the threat of force, potentially even the threat of violence to remove some of these people. While they have not had to use violence, thankfully, it is possible to foresee a time when they might have to, because someone insists on continuing to be threatening to this congregation. May Adonai ensure that our security team never has to cross that line. Being a protector is a hard job, and Phinehas was a man who stepped up as a protector in this instance. Phinehas' call to step up in zeal to defend the holy place is a foreshadowing of Yeshua. Yes, there it is again, foreshadowing. At John 2:13-22, we get the famous incident where money changers are in the temple, turning it into a place of commerce and cheating people. As I mentioned before, when one holds money as more important than the Lord, or more important than one's fellow human being, money becomes an idol. These merchants in the temple have essentially been claiming more and more holy ground for the false god of money. As we read in John 2:14-15, in the temple he found those who were selling oxen and sheep and pigeons, and the money changers sitting there and making a whip of cords. He drove them all out of the temple with the sheep and the oxen, and he poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. It's easy to see the parallels between Yeshua and Phinehas here. Both men were full of zeal for the house of Adonai. Both men purified the holy place by use of force. However, like with Phinehas, we must make sure to take this in context. This is not an invitation for you to go find a church or a synagogue that sells things on the Sabbath and go through overturning their tables. While we colloquially call churches and synagogues the house of God in our culture, it is not the same as the temple. The temple is the place where he made his glory reside. It was so holy that only certain people could go to certain places in it, and our people's records show that miracles happened regularly in the temple. This temple was built upon the place that Adonai had decreed, and was the place where heaven touched earth. Furthermore, we must understand what Yeshua did here in its fullness. First, it says that he made a whip of cords. The leather cords that would have been available to him to make that whip would have been the cords used to tie up the animals being sold for sacrifice and then discarded once those animals were sold. Now consider how long it would have taken to braid a whip out of those cords. You don't just tie a few cords together and there you go, it's a whip, good to go. It would take at least an hour, from what I understand. So imagine that you're in the temple that day and you're selling animals for sacrifices, something that you know you're not supposed to be doing because temple authorities have forbidden other people from engaging in commerce on the Sabbath. And there sits this rabbi. You might recognize him as the famous rabbi that a lot of people think might be the Messiah. Or you might just see one more rabbi in a place that surely has many. Whatever the case, he's sitting there braiding a whip of leather cords. That's plenty of warning time to reconsider what you're doing. Then he stands up and starts driving all the animals out. Often when depicting this scene, people picture this as Yeshua bursting into wrathful violence, shouting as he drives out the money changers. Certainly it's very entertaining in the Chosen, but I submit to you that that wasn't the case at all. That wasn't how it went down. Isaiah 42:2 says of the coming Messiah, he will not cry out, nor raise his voice, nor cause his voice to be heard in the street. So we must rule out Yeshua shouting and acting like a madman here. He did not rage and scream and throw a temper tantrum, as we so often see depicted in movies, television, and even just illustrations. No, he acted calmly and with purpose. Rabbi J. Ledbetter, who taught me, said that he behaved a bit like a soldier. If a soldier gets angry, he's likely to make a mistake while his emotions get the better of him. That mistake might mean harming innocent people or causing harm to fall on his own people. Thus, his argument was that Yeshua did not burst into anger. He acted with purpose in response to the Father's zeal. The Father used Yeshua to strike a blow against the false god of money that had taken up residence in the temple. And he did not do so with shrieking wrath. And I know that that certainly strikes a blow against a lot of people who want to justify their anger, saying, you know, if you have a person who has a severe anger problem, but they are also someone who reads the scripture, they will say, well, Jesus got mad, didn't he? Yeshua got mad. Maybe internally, but he was not given to his anger. Even turning over the tables was not some sort of temper tantrum. See, in those days, there was a certain kind of etiquette around when you found a coin on the ground in a marketplace. If a coin fell on the merchant's side of the table, then it was assumed that it belonged to the merchant. If the coin fell on the customer's side, however, it was assumed that the coin belonged to the customers. And if you were on the customer's side and you found a coin, you were supposed to hold it up high and call out in a loud voice, "Did anyone drop a coin?" And you called this out 3 times, and if no one claimed it, you got to keep it. So when Yeshua saw the people being cheated in the temple, which direction do you think he overturned the tables? Toward the customer's side, toward the people who'd been cheated. So with the merchants too busy chasing after their animals, which Yeshua had driven away, this essentially becomes a sort of refund. Here's your money back, the money that they cheated you out of. It was a way of undoing the damage that had been done. Let that be a guiding post for us, not to just go around destroying, but to try to undo damage that's been done. This is Adonai showing us that when people come along to desecrate his holy place, he will appoint somebody to purify it. He has done it many times, but today we focus on Yeshua and Phinehas. And Phinehas was greatly rewarded for this great service. As we read in Numbers 25:12-13, "Behold, I give him my covenant of peace, and it shall be to him and to his descendants after him the covenant of a perpetual priesthood." I wanted to take a closer look at that last part, the covenant of perpetual priesthood, both to him and to his descendants. This promise confused me at first. After all, we currently do not live under the Levitical priesthood, so how could this promise be said to be true? I started by looking at the Hebrew words used here and thinking that there might be a clue. However, the word translated to perpetual here is olam, which means eternal or forever. One might also translate that word to eternity or universe, as it is often translated in our liturgy. This seemed to speak to the idea that even if Phinehas and his descendants are no longer priests on this earth, they may well be priests in eternity, or perhaps they will be priests again when the resurrection comes and will serve as priests in the millennial kingdom. Perhaps that's what it's referring to. But this answer did not satisfy me, so I dug a little deeper and found something fascinating. Now, I do want to say that when the temple is restored, we will also see the restoration of the Levitical priesthood. And 1 Chronicles chapter 5 shows us the lineage of the priesthood descending from Phinehas. That is enough to satisfy the terms of Adonai's covenant with Phinehas. However, I found that there was more to it than that. Remember when I said that Phinehas is really cool? Well, here it comes. In Judges 20, 26 through 28, we read the following. Then all the children of Israel, that is, all the people, went up and came to the house of God and wept. They sat there before the Lord and fasted that day until evening, and they offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. So the children of Israel inquired of the Lord. The ark of the covenant of God was there in those days, and Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, stood before it in those days, saying, Shall I yet again go out to battle against the children of my brother Benjamin, or shall I cease? So we see here that by the time of the second to last chapter of Judges, Phinehas still serves as priest. And we know it's the same Phinehas because it lists him as the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, as it did in the Torah. There is some debate about how long after the time of the Torah the book of Judges takes place. As Bo has pointed out to me, the events described in the book of Judges may all be happening at the same time rather than in a sequence. Even so, the general consensus among scholars is that the book of Judges covers around a period of 410 years. If we go with the general scholarly consensus, this would make Phinehas, by this point, 430 years old at the absolute youngest. Probably 435, really. But while lifespans that long are not unheard of in the Bible, those people in Scripture who lived more than 1 century were all before the time of Noah's flood. Everyone who followed lived less than 2 centuries. Even Moses himself only lives to be 120 years old. Yeah, only 120 years old. But Phinehas appears to have lived at least 435 years. What's interesting is that while we get announcements of deaths for such figures as Aaron, Miriam, and Moses, and other important figures, we even get the record of death of Eleazar, Phinehas' father, in Joshua chapter 24. But Phinehas, we never get a record of Phinehas' death. This has led some rabbis to believe that Phinehas did not die. Rabbi Yalkut Shimoni said that Phinehas would later become known as Elijah. You can read about this at Yalkut Shimoni's commentaries on Torah 771:21. This viewpoint is not universally accepted among the Jewish people. Rather, this belongs to the more mystical interpretations of the Torah. I honestly do lean more toward the mystical interpretations of the Torah. I mean, if we go with the idea that the Bible is written by God, it's hard to get much more mystical than that. But this idea that Phinehas was immortal sounds outlandish to our modern sensibilities, as we have long been taught that everyone must die someday. However, it's not as strange as we might think from a biblical perspective. Elijah famously did not die, but rather was caught up by the chariot of fire. Similarly, according to Genesis 5:24, Enoch walked with God and was no more, for God took him. This one we understand to mean Enoch did not die, as most other people do, because it comes in the context of giving the lifespans of other men, telling us when they were born, when they had children, and when they died. Melchizedek similarly has no announcement of death. Rav Shaul, or Paul, as he's more commonly known, drew attention to this in Hebrews 7:3. He is without father or mother or genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but resembling the Son of God, he continues a priest forever. Yeshua similarly was caught up in the clouds after his resurrection rather than dying again. And there are some who even believe that John the Apostle, the revelator of Patmos, is still alive today, waiting for Yeshua to come back. So it seems that Phinehas may have been another such example of men in the Bible who never actually died. As I mentioned before, there are some who follow Rabbi Yalkut Shimoni's interpretation that Phinehas became known as Eliyahu or Elijah. While I do not know if this is true, the evidence for it is certainly interesting. First, while most of the prophets of the Bible have some kind of lineage or some explanation of where they come from, Elijah is introduced rather abruptly in 1 Kings 17:1 when he commands the rains to stop. That's the first we ever hear of Elijah, and all we know about him at this point, aside from him being a prophet who performs miracles, is that he's from Gilead. The tradition of connections between Phinehas and Elijah can be traced to the biblical antiquities of pseudo-philo from the 1st century. The biblical antiquities of pseudo-philo are narratives about biblical stories, but are not to be confused with actual scripture. This is for information, not for spiritual guidance. Even so, it's interesting to read this narrative. At that time, Phinehas was verging toward death, and the Lord said to him, "Behold, you have passed the 120 years that have been established for every man." See Genesis 6:3. "Now rise up and go from here and dwell in the desert on the mountain and dwell there many years. I will command my eagle, and he will nourish you there, and you will not come down again to mankind until the appointed time arrives, and you will be tested at the appropriate time, and then you will shut up the heaven from rain, and by your mouth it will be opened up. Afterward you will be raised up to the place where those who were before you were raised up, and you will be there until I remember the world. And then I will bring you, and you will get a taste of death." Note Adonai sending his eagle to nourish Phinehas. Similarly, in 1 Kings 17:4, Elijah was nourished by ravens sent by Adonai. And Phinehas is told that he will shut up the rain just as Elijah shut up the rain. And Adonai tells Phinehas that he will raise him up just as he raised Elijah up. While all of this, as I said, is not actually biblical, it is fascinating to see how our people in antiquity equated these two figures, and many rabbis today continue in that tradition. Now, there are some detractors, of course, to be fair. Rabbi Ibn Ezra pointed out the Hebrew word akarav, where Adonai says that the priesthood will belong to Phinehas and his descendants after him. Rabbi Ibn Ezra therefore argued that Phinehas therefore must have died, and therefore could not be Elijah if he was to have descendants after him, right? I'd like to give a definitive answer as to whether Phinehas was Elijah, or even whether Adonai blessed Phinehas with immortality, or if Phinehas just lived an extraordinarily long life. But the truth is that I just don't completely know for sure. All I can say for certain is that Phinehas lived longer than most men of his time, and there's a lesson to be learned in that if we continue a little further in the Torah portion. Starting at Numbers 27:12, we read the following. "The Lord said to Moses, 'Go up into this mountain of Abarim, and see the land that I have given to the people of Israel. When you have seen it, you also shall be gathered to your people, as your brother Aaron was, because you rebelled against my word in the wilderness of Zin, when the congregation quarreled, failing to uphold me as holy at the waters before their eyes.'" This is a callback to Deuteronomy 32:51-52, where we read, "Because you trespassed against me among the children of Israel at the waters of Meribah Kadesh, in the wilderness of Zin, because you did not hallow me in the midst of the children of Israel, yet you shall see the land before you, though you shall not go there, into the land which I am giving to the children of Israel." In our Torah portion for this week, Adonai reminds Moses that he shall not enter the promised land, though he allows him this opportunity to see it. So Moses looks out at the promised land and sees how beautiful it truly is. Now bear in mind that when Moses sees this, he's also just recently seen a man granted long, potentially everlasting life. I think in his position, I might be inclined to be a little bit bitter. Wrongly, but I might be inclined that way. I'd probably say something like, "Is there no chance that I could convince you to reconsider? I know I made a lot of mistakes, but I'm Moses, right? I'm the man you called to bring these people out of Egypt. I rebelled against you regarding the rock, but that seems a small offense for such a harsh punishment, right?" That would be me in Moses' position, unless, of course, I knew what Moses knew. Then we're looking at a different story. Even if I didn't have the courage to say it out loud, it's certainly what I'd be thinking. And we all know that anything you think, Adonai hears. But let's look at Moses' response. In Numbers 27:15-17, we read, "Moses spoke to the Lord, saying, 'Let the Lord, the God of spirits of all flesh, appoint a man over the congregation who shall go out before them and come in before them, who will lead them out and bring them in, that the congregation of the Lord may not be as sheep who have no shepherd. It's important to note that on that occasion where Moses struck the rock rather than speaking to it, it was out of frustration at the children of Israel. And when faced with the full reality of his punishment, rather than bargain or complain, he prays that a new leader will take his place among the people for their sake. He cares more about what will happen to the people when he's gone than he does about what happens to him. And while I can't prove this, I think it's this humility and this love for the people that inspired Adonai to show him something far better even than showing him the promised land. At Matthew 17, 1-3, we read, "Now after 6 days, Yeshua took Peter, James, and John, his brother, led them up on a high mountain by themselves, and he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as white as the light. And behold, Moses and Elijah appeared to them, talking with him." Moses got to see the Messiah face to face, and even got to speak with him. Often when we read through this passage, we tend to put ourselves in the shoes of Yeshua's Talmidim, his disciples, who witnessed this incredible event. However, try putting yourself in Moses' shoes for a moment. Adonai has shown you the promised land, but told you that you can't go in. You responded by asking that he appoint a new leader over them so that they won't be lost like sheep without a shepherd. Adonai responds by taking you through time and space to talk with the shepherd of shepherds. And in talking with him, you know that all will be well. You know now without a certainty that the day is coming when the dead will be raised and all will live under Adonai's rule. Here is the anointed one, whom the Lord will appoint over all the nations. Here is the Messiah who will set all prisoners free and destroy slavery of the soul, something that even Moses hadn't seen freedom from in his lifetime. Here is the Messiah who will conquer death by submitting to it. For just as Moses, upon seeing the promised land that he was not to enter, humbled himself to instead intercede on the people's behalf, so too did Yeshua forego asking for blessings upon himself and instead saw to the well-being of his followers. Yeshua knew the stories in Scripture. He knew about Phinehas, who lived a long life. He knew about Enoch, who walked with God and was no more because God took him. He knew about Elijah, who rode off in a fiery chariot and did not taste death. And above all, he knew that he was destined to rule all nations. He knew that he alone in all the world was without sin. That if anyone deserved to live forever without suffering or death, it was him. He could have asked that the Father establish his kingdom on earth then and there. He could have asked to live 1,000 years or even forever so that he could rule over all nations that ever could be. As an old hymn has said, he could have called 10,000 angels to his side, not only to spare him the pain of the cross, but to conquer all the world. 2 angels were involved in the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. 2. All the human armies of all the world across all of time would be no match for 10,000. Instead, he chose the path of humility and love so that we might understand and so that he might bring more people into redemption and into his kingdom. As Philippians 2, 8-11 says, he humbled himself still more by becoming obedient even to death, death on a stake as a criminal. Therefore God raised him to the highest place and gave him the name above every name, that in the honor of the name given Yeshua, every knee will bow in heaven, on earth, and under the earth, and every tongue will acknowledge that Yeshua the Messiah is Adonai, to the glory of God the Father. And as we read in the prophecy of Zechariah 9:9, rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout in triumph, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. He is just and endowed with salvation, humble and mounted on a donkey, even a colt, the foal of a donkey. As Isaiah 50, verse 6 says, I gave my back to those who strike me, and my cheeks to those who pluck out the beard. I did not cover my face from humiliation and spitting. And as Isaiah 53:7 says, he was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth, like a lamb that is led to slaughter, and like a sheep that is silent before its shearers, so he did not open his mouth. He was and is more worthy of God's blessings than any of us could ever hope to be, and yet he allowed himself to suffer the worst that this world has to offer. Rather than rule, he served. Rather than conquer, he surrendered. And in so doing, the world became his legal property, per the law of Adonai. He calls upon us to do as he did. Through acts of service, we expand his kingdom on earth and strengthen it. You are in the Lord's army. That does not mean going out and fighting whenever you feel like it. It means following his orders. And he has written his orders down so that we may have them for every battle of every age. Shabbat Shalom.